it has been renovated over the years. But given a choice of removing it, which would be extraordinarily difficult because you couldn't do it by road from where they are, demolishing it or giving it to the fire brigade to practice on, I think the third option is quite ingenious.
So do I. We agree absolutely. Who owns it now, by the way?
The Suttons.
The Suttons own it now.
Brent Sutton had a dairy business, funnily enough, and he imported technology and added value to products, and I think he sold it, and he's obviously bought this. But I understand they want to build a new house, but it's apparently going to be relatively modest. That's what they're saying.
Something more discreet, we're told.
Yeah, but that's their prerogative. And
of course. No, it is their prerogative. It was just curious because this house that is going to be burned dates back to the 1980s. It's not, incredibly ancient.
No.
Is it a house you'd be happy to live in from what
I think a lot of people would be happy to live in it, but if you're going to pay $14 million for a coastal property, then you want to live in the sort of house that you want to be in, clearly. And obviously this house doesn't meet their needs, and there's nothing that says they have to live in a house that happens to have been there for 35 years.
Yeah, I can't see any fuss here at all, really.
Yeah.
I think it's an admirable use of this property. Yeah. If they're not going to live in it and they don't want it, that the fire brigade should burn it down, and we should all live.
I don't think there was any there was nothing contentious. Just a lot of eyebrows were raised.
But if eyebrows are raised, then there was something contentious.
Yeah, and it's not as if this is historical, this house. It has no historical value. It's just the fact that it's on an expensive property that's made everybody take notice. And there's a lot of houses that are on expensive properties that people choose to get rid of, renovate, pull down. This is just another version.
Do you know this house? Do you know the house?
Yes, but as I say, it was always kept quite private. I've never been in the house. I've seen it from the water. I've never been in it.
Jordan Major is the new bachelor on television's The Bachelor, and he's looking for sweetness and honesty in a woman. I think that's a quote from the show. Obviously, people find all sorts of depths in this show, but it's interesting because we were talking about International Women's Day yesterday. Is the premise of this... Have you seen it? Is the premise patriarchal?
I saw an episode of the previous one. Yes, I think the premise is patriarchal. I think the whole thing is vile. I can't imagine why. I mean, you're selling a man, really, in a sense here, and people are bidding for him in a sense as well, I suppose. It's really disgusting, actually, I think.
Yeah, but no one's forcing you to watch it.
No.
Right?
No, but I'm not...
There's plenty of things on the other channel. I heard a lovely story the other day about a woman whose daughter, who was about 10, said very proudly to her mother, "Mummy, when I grow up, I'm going to be a lawyer and I'm going to marry the bachelor."
Well, now that's...
So
I think,
there's the juxtaposition.
Well,
for
actually,
you
see, I think you've assisted my argument with that story. 10-year-olds think this is a good idea.
Yeah.
But I don't think anyone else can think this is a good idea, really.
Well, I think the women do because they become celebrities.
Yes, but they
That's what it's all. It's a celebrity culture thing.
I know, but
that's all it is.
But does it intrigue you that women compete at the behest of a bloke who favours them with roses?
Exactly.
It actually appalls me, personally, but I'm not going to say they don't have a right to do it, and I'm just not going to watch it.
So do you have two sets of opinions, Michelle? One is your personal opinion, which you've now just expressed, and the other is the opinion which you expressed before that, which was exactly the opposite.
No, it wasn't opposite. All I'm saying is that you don't have to watch it. Nobody is forcing anyone to watch this material.
But that's really a ridiculous argument. You very rarely have ridiculous arguments, but that whole argument, you don't have to watch it. Once you go down that track, there's nothing you can condemn on television at all, because nobody has to watch it.
Well, that's true.
True, right.
Okay, we've established positions.
Including sports, Brian.
Which are mostly outdoors, Brian.
I've got to go. I've got to climb some trees.
Brian... Stairs, I think you mean.
Stairs
Brian,
is what I mean. Yes.
Brian Edwards, thank you very much on the panel today. And Michelle Bogue, thank you too, Michelle. And Checkpoint with John Campbell on the way.
Kia ora everyone, welcome to Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm John Campbell. On behalf of the Checkpoint team, thank you for joining us. Tonight, reports of a shooting involving police in the Bay of Plenty. We're working to confirm details. In fact, we've just received a statement. We will have that in about 30 seconds. Also tonight, the SIS, the GCSB and spying on New Zealanders. Russell Tully, guilty of murder. We talked to the man who confronted him as he left the Ashburton Winds office. And will dairy farmers be forced to sell their farms? And will that drive down the value of the assets so many farmers have borrowed against? Leilani Mamoisia is standing by with the RNZ News. But first, Kim Baker-Wilson with the latest on reports 3 police officers have been shot in the Bay of Plenty. Kim.
John, we can now confirm those reports. 2 of those officers are men. They've been taken to Whakatane Hospital. The hospital itself tells me that they are now in a stable condition, so some good news there. A 3rd officer, though, has been taken farther away to Rotorua Hospital. The condition of that officer is unclear. Unclear just what has happened to these 3 officers. We do know that there's now a large-scale police operation around Kaurero in the Bay of Plenty. The news just came out in the last hour that the men had been shot and there was an armed incident at that rural address. Police National Headquarters, who first released this information, have told us it's a crisis situation for them. So it's quite clear that it is a very serious situation. We're hoping to bring you more information as we get it.
Thanks so much, Kim. And we are speaking to witnesses there and they will join us in the next half hour or so. But first, here's Leilani with the rest of the day's news.
Russell John Tully has been found guilty on 2 murder charges and 1 charge of attempted murder over the Ashburton work and income shootings. The 49-year-old has been on trial in the High Court in Christchurch for the past 2 weeks. Sally Murphy was there.
The jury of 7 men and 4 women delivered their verdicts just before 4 o'clock, after about 7 hours of deliberation. They found Tully guilty for the murders of Peggy Noble and Lee Cleveland and the attempted murder of Kim Adams. They also found him guilty on firearms charges. Tully was found not guilty for the attempted murder of Lindy Curtis, who was shot as she hid under her desk, and a charge of setting a trap. In a statement, Peggy Noble's family acknowledged the support which has been given to them. They say they are thankful for the strength which each witness displayed to reach this outcome, and their love goes out to all the victims affected by this tragedy. At the High Court in Christchurch, Sally Murphy.
The Prime Minister says recommended changes for the GCSB would technically represent an expansion of its authority to carry out surveillance on New Zealanders. But he says it is not an extension of the intelligence agency's powers overall, as under the existing law, the SIS could still use the GCSB in certain circumstances. Under proposed legislation, the GCSB could carry out surveillance for the purpose of protecting national security and under warrant. John Key says the government will now work with other political parties before starting to draft legislation. The Labour Party supports the idea of a single piece of legislation, but wants to see more detail about the GCSB potentially having more powers to spy on New Zealanders. The Green Party says it is adamantly opposed to any expansion of the government spy agency's powers. In the United States, the leading Republican contender for the US presidency, Donald Trump, has reaffirmed his position as the party's frontrunner. He's had wins in the key industrial state of Michigan as well as in Mississippi. The BBC's James Cook reports.
2 significant wins for Donald Trump, according to the projections of the US media. The 2 most important states which are being contested today, along with Idaho and Hawaii for the Republican Party. There had been some suggestion that Donald Trump had had a bad weekend. He had split the primaries over the weekend with his closest rival, Ted Cruz. He had been particularly vulgar in a debate last week, and there was a suggestion that that was hurting him among voters. This will give him the opportunity to say that he has regained the momentum.
James Cook. In the Democratic primaries, Hillary Clinton has won in Mississippi, but she appears to be facing a tougher challenge in Michigan from her rival Bernie Sanders. The Ministry for Primary Industries has charged a person over the abuse of bobby calves. The ministry began an investigation last September after receiving footage of what appeared to be abuse of bobby calves in the Waikato region. The footage was released by the animal welfare groups Safe and Farm Watch. The ministry has filed charges under the Animal Welfare Act at the Huntly District Court. A spokesman, Scott Gallagher, says the investigation is ongoing and the ministry is unable to comment any further. Retail spending using electronic cards has risen, with people swiping more for purchases such as clothing and dining out. Official figures show spending using debt, credit and charge cards rose a seasonally adjusted 0.7% in February after a small rise the month before. The rise was helped by people buying clothing and big-ticket items for the home, but also going to bars, restaurants and cafes. Core retail spending, which strips out vehicle-related industries, climbed 1.2%. Spending on fuel fell last month. Into sports now, the All Blacks prop Charlie Faumuina will make his first start of the Super Rugby season after being named in the Blues starting 15 for Friday night's game against the Hurricanes in Auckland. Faumuina is one of 9 changes coach Tana Umaga has made to the Blues starting side, which lost to the Crusaders last weekend. Bryn Hall and Ihaya West will start at halfback and first 5. Meanwhile, a decision on several key Hurricanes players won't be made until tomorrow. Captain Dane Coles, who hasn't played in either of the side's 2 losses, and along with wings Nehemiah Scudder and Corey Jane, are awaiting injury clearance. The failed drugs test of former world tennis number 1 Maria Sharapova was reckless beyond description, according to former World Anti-Doping Agency President Dick Pound. Sharapova revealed yesterday she tested positive for the banned substance meldonium in January. A number of sponsors have already distanced themselves from the Russian 5-time Grand Slam winner. Pound says there is no excuse.
Leaving aside the fair play side of it, I mean, you're running a $30 million annual business. It depends on you staying eligible to play tennis. And you're taking something that's on a list that you've known about for at least 4 months. I'm sorry, that's just, that is a big mistake.
Dick Pound. Maria Sharapova faces a ban of up to 4 years. And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, the lawyer Gary Bourne and the case for international arbitration, because heaven help any company that does business overseas without it. He also reckons we need to stop worrying so much about the TPP. We continue our window on the World Series on gospel music, and Pablo Perez Fernandes reports from Brazil. Ground zero for the Zika virus. Or is it? On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
In the Met Service weather till midnight tomorrow, Northland remaining showers will clear and become fine. Auckland to Manawatu, including Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty. A few showers everywhere from late tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, showers clearing and becoming fine overnight. Horowhenua to Wellington, also Wairarapa, fine apart from scattered rain tomorrow evening, possibly heavy about Kapiti. Bulla to Fiordland, drizzle developing overnight and turning to rain tomorrow, sometimes heavy and thundery, clearing south of Hokitika later. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine with high cloud tomorrow. Otago and Southland, morning rain tomorrow, followed by isolated showers. Also, severe northwest gales over exposed places of the South Island and southern North Island tomorrow, followed by severe southwest gales. In the Chatham Islands, it's a few showers tomorrow there. And I'll be back with news headlines at 5:30. It's just gone 5:09.
Thank you so much, Leilani. Let's go to this very much developing story. 3 police officers have been shot and injured during an incident at a rural property near Kawero. That's in the Bay of Plenty, of course, roughly on the road from Whakatane to Rotorua. We are able to confirm that 3 police officers have been shot. That from the police themselves. A witness at the nearby Hahuru Marae told Checkpoint that Onipu Springs Road had been closed off and she could see a number of police cars all around the area. Jeff Mercer is the editor of the Whakatane Beacon and he is there now. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us from the field. Can you tell us where exactly you are?
I'm standing on the intersection of Onipu Springs Road with State Highway 30, the north end of it. It's the road from Whakatane to Rotorua.
Okay, and what is happening there? Is there a cordon in place? You can't get to where these shootings are reportedly, where they reportedly occurred?
That's correct. There's 2 police cars blocking the road. There's another 4 or 5 scattered around the place. But I can see about 200 metres south from the intersection an ambulance, a police tactical vehicle and other police vehicles, which would appear to indicate that quite close to the intersection, something occurred.
Okay. Reports from the police themselves that 3 officers have been shot, 2 in a stable condition, 1 reportedly more serious. What else do you know from the scene, Jeff?
I spoke very briefly with a very tight-lipped Detective Inspector Greg Stanton as he was getting into his car. I said, were members of the public in danger still? He said, not where you are. I said, did that mean that the perpetrator, whoever, had been caught? He said no comment, so I don't know what to read into that.
Okay, Jeff Mercer, who's the editor of the Whakatane Beacon. Thanks so much, Jeff. We've also been speaking to people at the nearby marae, and they tell us that the road is still very much cordoned off, and it does appear still to be an ongoing operation. Obviously, we will update you as we hear more about both what is happening at the scene and the condition of the officers involved. It's 11.5 minutes past 5. After 7 hours of deliberation, a jury has found Russell John Tully guilty of the murders of Peggy Noble and Lee Cleveland and the attempted murder of Kim Adams at the Ashburton Work and Income Office in 2015. The 49-year-old has been on trial in the High Court in Christchurch for the past 2 weeks. Reporter Sally Murphy is outside the High Court.
Well, that's right, John. The jury came back with their verdicts shortly before 4 o'clock this afternoon. But before they did that, this morning they asked to review the CCTV footage from the WINS office. They specifically wanted to see the part where Lindy Curtis was shot. Earlier in the trial, we heard that she was hiding under her desk when the gunman came and shot her in the leg. And of course, the jury came back with a not guilty verdict for Tully attempting to murder her. They also asked for a copy of friend of the court's James Rapley's closing address, but Judge Manda said that they couldn't get that because it was simply submissions. He's not defending Tully, and that they should just focus purely on the evidence that was in front of them.
Sally, what was Tully's reaction to the verdict?
Well, he was quite calm. He was in the dock throughout the whole trial. He's been sitting down the back of the court because he has been representing himself. But as the verdicts were read out, he just stood there calmly, and he simply nodded at Justice Manda when the verdicts were finished and was escorted out of the courtroom. But tensions were quite high outside the court when the family members and WINS workers who gave evidence left. They were escorted out a side door. Media were waiting for them there, and we understand that there was a wee scuffle between a family member and a cameraman.
Sally Murphy, who was outside the High Court. Thank you so much, Sally. So just confirming, Russell John Tully guilty of the murders of Peggy Noble and Lee Cleveland and the attempted murder of Kim Adams. David COOZE was at the WINS office that day, seeing his case manager, Peggy Noble, one of the women murdered. He watched as Russell Tully walked into the office wearing a balaclava.
He just basically walked right around the counter and shot Peggy, the lady she was interviewing me at the time. And, it wasn't a good sight at all.
No, a terrible sight, which I suspect you simply can't get out of your mind.
No, I never will. It'll never ever leave me. It'll never, it's just one of those things that I wish I could delete, but I can't.
No, I can well imagine that. You were there as a client, of course, right?
Yeah, that's right. I just been to my doctor's and my shoulder was out, so it was out by a quarter of an inch or half an inch. So every time I moved, it was like pain. So I had a few months off. So I had to go into WINS to take my paperwork in there, and within I'd say a minute or two while I was in there, this gunman came in and pulled up a gun and just used it straight away. Not even say one word or nothing.
What happened after that first exchange, after that first shot? What happened then?
I spun around and I just seen people that were there, and I knew we can't do anything at all, and I was too far away from him to get a hold of the guy. But so I just turned around and pushed this lady in the back there to say, we're out of here, and she knew. And then at the same time, she was away out the door. At the same time, I looked at the guard, and he was standing there, and I just grabbed his arm and just told him, no, you'll be next, mate. So I grabbed his arm, and I noticed that there was no children there, so I was so happy that there was no children there. So grabbed the guard and walked out the door. By the time I walked out the second door, I had the second shot go off. I was thinking, oh my God, there's another person gone. And raced across the road, and let the people know across there, they tell them to ring the police. And I spun around and seen this guy coming out.
And this is what makes your story even more extraordinary, is that rather than running, you decided to confront him at that time. What made you do that?
I think I was a bit angry too, at the same time, I wanted to delay him or even give his ass a bit of a smack, or kick in the ass or something, but what made me do it? I think I was more angry than anything that made me, just took over me, and before you know it, just as I was going for this guy, I was just thinking, he shoots me, but I was just thinking of my daughter at the time then too. I was thinking if I get shot, I think my daughter will understand.
So what did you say to him? Do you remember what you said to him in that moment?
Oh yeah, I said quite a few words. I didn't want to say really too much in court, but there were things like that. Why did you do it for? And you're gutless. At the same time, I was swearing as well. I was going, me and you, one out, one on one right now. There were a couple of other things I was saying, and then at the same time, I was trying to cross the road as well, get at this bugger, and while he was looking at his bike lock, I would move over a bit more onto the road, and then get closer and closer, and
There is a sense that you rattled him, and did you have that sense that he was hearing your words and he was acknowledging what you were saying? Did you believe that you were getting to him?
Yeah, definitely I got to him. He was looking up and down all the time, and he was trying to undo his lock on his push bike. And then once he had got it undone, I was more or less across the road. And then he tried to put on his helmet. And when you've got a balaclava rolled up into a beanie, you can't even put your bike helmet on. He dropped that, and he dropped his bike lock. I just nearly got the bugger.
That was David COOZE, who was a witness to Russell Tully both committing one of the shootings inside the WINZ office and leaving the WINZ office after the shooting. Russell Tully found guilty in the Christchurch High Court earlier this afternoon. It's 19 minutes past 5. A review of New Zealand's spy agencies has found the SIS and the GCSB should operate under one law, and that under particular circumstances, both should be able to carry out surveillance on New Zealanders. Some parts of the current law have been described as a double-humped ass by one of the reviewers, the former Labour Deputy Prime Minister Michael Cullen. He says the law is so disjointed and inconsistent it could compromise the safety and security of New Zealanders. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Dame Patsy Reddy and Sir Michael primarily looked at whether the current law is working and whether there's adequate oversight of the intelligence agencies. Dr Cullen says the law makes it difficult for the agencies to have a good understanding of what they can do legally and therefore causes compliance problems. He says it should be completely rewritten.
The confusion and the inconsistency and the lack of clarity in the drafting legislation has led to some quite perverse consequences, with potential impacts on the safety of individual New Zealanders.
Under proposed new legislation, the GCSB could carry out surveillance on New Zealanders for the purpose of protecting national security and under warrant. The review says the GCSB already has the ability to do that in some circumstances, but it's been extremely cautious in how it's chosen to use that power. Dr Cullen says the GCSB should be able to help other agencies when, for example, the lives of New Zealanders are in danger.
The view taken by the GCSB is that they can't, because other parts of their Act run in contradiction to that. The law is unclear. And I would have thought that most people would take the view that in those kinds of cases it is legitimate.
The Prime Minister John Campbell was asked whether the proposed changes would result in an expansion of the powers of the GCSB.
Technically, yes, it's an extension of their current authority. I don't think it's an extension of powers of the agencies overall, because under the existing law and under the right set of circumstances, SIS could generate a warrant for which it could then use GCSB as an agent of them to do the same thing.
The Labour Party leader Andrew Little says on a first reading there are no major obstacles to his party's support, but he says there are some areas that will need clarifying first.
I am continuing to seek clarification whether allowing the GCSB to effectively take action in relation to New Zealand citizens and residents is an extension of powers. I understand at the moment that they do some of that work on behalf of other agencies and under the warrants of other agencies, so whether that's an extension of powers is not very clear.
The Green Party co-leader Materia Ture says the recommended changes represent a significant erosion of New Zealanders' privacy.
By spreading the responsibilities across the two agencies, it will create more confusion and, most importantly, more spying on New Zealanders. More spying on New Zealanders does not make us more free or more safe.
The review also recommends changes to the position of the Inspector General of Intelligence and Security, parliamentary oversight and how agencies deal with foreign partners. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
So in one sense, the reviewers, Dame Patsy Reddy and Sir Michael Cullen, appear to have been clarifying anomalies and confusions arriving from the government's own GCSB amendment bill in 2013. And as Sir Michael Cullen told me earlier, that bill was confusing about the GCSB's powers to intercept the private communications of New Zealanders.
Well, on the face of it, it says you can't. The law behind that very largely says you can. But in fact, the confusion is such that the GCSB has determined that it's not legally safe for them to act, even when the safety and security, immediate safety and security, of a New Zealander is at stake. And in fact, there's been some quite serious examples in that regard. So it's much better to start with a clean slate and say this really is not rational. The rational thing is to say, if we're targeting New Zealanders, first of all, it should be on the utmost grounds of national security, not for these broader things like international well-being and economic well-being and so on. Secondly, you've got a double lock in terms of the approval from the Attorney General and the Judicial Commissioner. And thirdly, you've got to meet tests of necessity, proportionality. There's no less intrusive means of gathering information, and so on. And finally, that you've got very strong oversight capacity and powers on the part of the Inspector General of Intelligence and Security.
Nonetheless, you do have an expansion of the GCSB's powers in literal terms, don't you? And if we go
not
back...
Not really, John. That's the problem.
But if you look at the GCSB Amendment Act 2013 and you look at Section 14, it says, and I quote, "In performing the Bureau's function," in Section 8B, the Director, any employee of the Bureau, any person acting on behalf of the Bureau must not authorise or do anything for the purpose of intercepting the private communications of a person who is a New Zealand citizen. Now, that's going to change, isn't it? That's going to change.
But the problem with that, John, is that that's what it says on the face of Section 14. You then have to go to the definitions clause and look at the definition of what a private communication is, which I've just run through. And I don't think you can seriously argue that if you're engaged in planning a terrorist act, you can have a reasonable expectation you're not going to have your communications monitored. Secondly, there's an exception if you're an agent of a foreign power, which is also a very wide definition under current legislation, which we are proposing should be severely narrowed. For example, in the case of Kim.com...
The point is, sorry, I just want to come back to 2013. The point is that when people said, gosh, there are so many exceptions, this legislation is effectively meaningless, they were dismissed, and I've got the Prime Minister's own words from the third reading, taken from Hansard, as misinformation and conspiracy theories. In other words, the people who said back at the time, this licenses you to spy on New Zealanders, were right. What you're now doing, I guess, is formalising that, aren't you?
No, not really, not at all. Because, as I said, the SIS has the capacity to monitor New Zealanders. I mean, essentially what you're really trying to argue, John, when you argue that you shouldn't have those coherent, combined, consistent powers, is that you're going back to playing cricket without Snicko and Hawkeye. Because the SIS's capacities, obviously, are older generation by and large. The GCSB's is more recent generation technology. That's what GCSB basically is. It is a technology. And how do you use that technology in a way consistent with a free, open and democratic society? And I don't think, John, one could seriously argue, I think it's an impossible position to argue, that if somebody really is engaged in planning a serious terrorist action, one shouldn't be using those capacities of the GCSB to try and prevent that terrorist action.
Except weren't they the reassurances we were given? In other words, you are now making rational, cohesive, persuasive arguments around a playing field that had already shifted. And I wonder if that's why people are mistrustful of this process.
No, I mean, it's not for me to comment about what was said or done by various people in 2013 and 2014. Patsy Reddy and our concern was to look at the very muddled nature of our current legislation, because the acts have quite different origins, quite different timings. The SIS Act still bears the hallmarks of starting in the age of the Cold War. The GCSB Act pretty much bears its markings in the actual act being passed soon after the 9/11 terrorist activity in New York. We need to start from a clean slate and to recognise, for example, that the kind of actions we're talking about don't just come from Islamist groups, they can come from a wide variety of people, as the Norwegians learned only a couple of years or so ago. And I don't want to misinterpret it saying this, the people engaging in them believe they're doing it in a just cause. I mean, they are not purely evil people. They believe there's a just cause in which they are working for. They're just profoundly wrong-headed, sometimes about the cause and always about the means they're using.
Sir Michael Cullen, 27.5 minutes past 5. You're listening to Checkpoint. A major police operation is underway in response to an armed incident at the Bay of Plenty. We just want to confirm 3 police officers have been shot and injured during the incident, which occurred at a rural property near Kawido. The 3 officers have been taken to hospital where they are being treated for their injuries. The Armed Defender Squad is currently at the scene and the incident is ongoing. We will obviously update that the moment we know more. Also coming up, flood assistance for those in Christchurch's FLOCKTON BASIN. Boy, that's been a long wait for them. And the Electoral Commission investigates claims some flag referendum voting papers may have been stolen from letterboxes. We'd love to hear from you in any way you choose. Text 2101 if you have feedback. You can text and email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz, and Facebook and Twitter. You can get us on Checkpoint RNZ. Let's head to Christchurch now, to an area known as the FLOCKTON Basin. This was an area that sunk by half a metre and became prone to heavy flooding after the city's earthquakes. The dispute, and it was a protracted one, is this earthquake damage or simply unrelated flooding? Now the Christchurch City Council is offering flood assistance to people whose homes have suffered above floor flooding, and in 7 cases the council is offering to purchase the property. Joe Byrne's Carrick Street property flooded 15 times. Sometimes the family found themselves waist deep in water before they finally abandoned their home in March 2014. At the time, the Byrnes were still paying a mortgage on a house they couldn't live in or sell. I asked Joe what she'd heard today.
Council has got a new policy where they're going to get the affected residents in FLOCKTON who are not helped by any of the downstream engineering works they're doing, who will be left in homes that flood regularly. They're giving them an option so they've actually got choices for a future. I think it's amazing.
How long have you waited for this, Joe?
Well, these people have been living like this for over 5 years in constant fear of flooding. It's incredible.
You I recall it so well. Your house underwater, every time it rained, your house was underwater again, a sense of complete hopelessness, and also no one wanting to acknowledge that the earthquakes had lowered the land, making you more flood prone, and you just never gave up. You were singular in your determination that someone would give you some kind of compensation for what had happened.
Well, I've been still working it with everybody still, the last few years. I'm on the local community board now. I'm working with our local councillors and things. We've been meeting with the EQC regularly. We haven't given up. We've just kept working and working. And people in the FLOCKTON area have had payouts from EQC for land damage. They've acknowledged that we have got land damage due to the earthquakes and that they were due some sort of response to that. And the council has acknowledged that people have been left in a situation which is absolutely inhumane.
I can hear what's going on behind you. Who are you there with, Joe? Is that the sounds of excitement in the background?
Just the girls I work with. It's pretty exciting, yeah.
Yeah, and so does this mean you can go on with your life? Does this mean you can actually leave FLOCKTON behind and finally start again?
Well, we left 2 years ago. We walked out of our house.
I remember it. And you walked out to nothing. You had nothing, did you?
Nothing. We got another house with a 100% mortgage, and we have struggled, but we've settled our claim finally 3 days before Christmas, and the house is going to be demolished this month.
And what's that feel like, not having that yoke around your neck, that terrible weight?
Oh my God, we're so happy. It's unbelievable. I sort of feel we can plan for our future. We've just got to get EQC back to fix the house we bought because it had a very bad repair. But, we can do things. We went on holiday. We can plan for our future, paint houses, paint rooms, do things like that. Life's amazing.
Jo BYRNE from the FLOCKTON Basin in Christchurch. The police are investigating 4 possible cases of voting fraud in the flag referendum. At the same time, an Auckland man has said on Facebook that he stole hundreds of voting papers from letterboxes and voted in favour of the new design. The Electoral Commission has had 20 complaints from members of the public worried about people using voting papers that are not their own, and they have referred 4 of them to the police. Carla Penman reports.
5 days ago, Colleen Stewart says she stumbled on the controversial comment on Facebook,
which said that he had collected over 300 voting papers from neighbours and friends, and that he had ticked them all for the new flag and was sending them into the Electoral Commission as a vote.
The post also states that no referendum had ever brought change except for the Irish referendum that allowed gay marriage, and it's laughable that people get the opportunity to vote for change, then decide to keep the old. Ms Stewart says she took a screenshot of it and then reported it to the Henderson Police and the Electoral Commission.
I've also come across other people that have actually received not one voting paper for themselves, but 2 or 3.
She says it seems there are huge gaps in the way the voting's being done and in what the Electoral Commission's being made aware of. Grant Gillespie has refused to be interviewed by RNZ, but said via Facebook that he had since received about 50 hate messages from strangers. He also told RNZ that he had nothing to defend and just wanted it to be over. New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters says if the allegations against Mr Gillespie are true, it's a serious electoral crime.
Well, that's pretty alarming, and it just tells you what is wrong with holding a referendum outside of election days. Because on election days, the referendum costs are minimal, but also you have far greater security and checking. This shows you how much it can be manipulated.
He says it's just a matter of time until other cases of a similar nature surface. A person who is convicted of filling out someone else's voting paper faces a maximum sentence of 2 years jail and or a fine of up to $40,000. In Auckland for Checkpoint, Carla Penman.
Coming up on Checkpoint, more on the developing story of 3 police officers shot in the Bay of Plenty. A media conference is scheduled for 6 o'clock. There are now reports a fourth officer has been shot, 4 police officers shot in the Bay of Plenty. We will have that media conference at 6 o'clock. The government comes under pressure to update the country's adoption law. It's Super Tuesday number 2 in the US. We're live in Washington. And in light of the Fonterra dairy payouts, concerns grow for dairy farmers planning to sell out of their businesses. All of that coming up. But first, here's Leilani Mamoisia with the RNZ headlines.
Police say they're dealing with a crisis situation at a rural address near Kawero in Bay of Plenty, with at least 4 police officers shot. 2 policemen are in Whakatane Hospital in stable conditions, and a 3rd officer has been taken to Rotorua Hospital. A witness says there are at least 10 police patrol cars, 2 ambulances, up to 15 armed officers, and a plane circling above. Russell John Tully has been found guilty on 2 murder charges and 1 charge of attempted murder in relation to the Ashburton work and income shooting. The 49-year-old has been on trial in the High Court in Christchurch for the past 2 weeks. The jury of 7 men and 4 women delivered their verdicts this afternoon after about 7 hours of deliberation. The Prime Minister says recommended changes for the GCSB would technically represent an expansion of its authority to carry out surveillance on New Zealanders. But John Campbell says it's not an extension of the intelligence agency's powers overall. Under proposed new legislation, the GCSB could carry out surveillance for the purpose of protecting national security and under warrant. The Labour Party says adoption law reform should be an urgent priority for the government. The Human Rights Review Tribunal has ruled the 61-year-old Adoption Act discriminates against people based on sex, marital status, disability and age. The Act places restrictions on single men trying to adopt a female child and civil union partners, same-sex de facto couples and anyone under the age of 25 from adopting. In the United States primaries, the Republican presidential frontrunner Donald Trump has won in Mississippi and Michigan. In the Democratic Party race, frontrunner Hillary Clinton is projected to have won the nomination in Mississippi, but rival Bernie Sanders is leading in Michigan with 80% of the vote counted. And it's 5:37.
Thanks, Leilani. In a couple of minutes, we have somebody who is inside the cordon, the police cordon near Kawero. We will go to them shortly, but let's turn quickly to business news with Jonathan Mitchell. Jonathan, spending using cards, EFTPOS and credit cards on the rise again. Why?
Well, February, yes, did notch another gain. I've got the annual data in front of me, John. Up 9% on February last year, $393 million to $4.6 billion, so some gains there. We're starting to see a bit of a trend now, month by month, retail spending using those cards rising. I guess the environment does support spending. We've got all these tourists coming in. What are they spending on? They're going out to the shops buying clothes. They're also going to restaurants and bars. People in New Zealand are doing the same. They're also spending on big ticket items around the home. You might need a new washing machine. And then you've got low fuel prices. The money from that is going in the back pocket and you're spending it elsewhere. And I guess low mortgage rates are another factor that are helping spending, so conditions are looking pretty good.
So some tailwinds. Are there any headwinds?
I guess the main ones would come from overseas. You might see some jitters from overseas affect people's confidence about spending. The next big one would be dairy. Obviously, we've had that forecast payout drop this week. The money not going to farmers, that's money not going into the communities. They're not going to spend out there. So I think as long as those tourists keep coming in and want to spend, locals want to spend, that's going to help buffer retail spending on electronic cards for some time.
Jonathan, all eyes on the Reserve Bank tomorrow though, right?
That's right. Well, the Reserve Bank releases its very in-depth monetary policy statement tomorrow, as well as review the OCR again. That data is coming out at 9 o'clock. Analysts and markets are factoring in no change, leave it at 2.5%. But the consensus is for at least one cut by June. The market essentially wants Graham Wheeler, that's the Governor of the Reserve Bank, to spell out a clear path. Will he cut interest rates in the foreseeable future? Rather than just say he'll leave the door ajar, essentially, they want the door wide open. We will cut down the track. If he doesn't, that would mean interest rates would stay the same for some time and his statement would be seen as hawkish, and that could actually drive the dollar up. So that would be something the Reserve Bank doesn't want. So essentially markets want a clear easing bias tomorrow. So we'll have to see in those statements whether they get it.
Right. In advance of such a big announcement tomorrow, were the markets fairly quiet today?
They were pretty flat all day, wait and see mode. The NZX 50 index did end up a touch, 11 points, the number 6457. The dollar trading at 67.21 US cents and 90.53 Australian.
Jonathan Mitchell, our business reporter from Wellington. Thanks so much, Jonathan. Returning now to the shooting of police officers in the Bay of Plenty. 4 police officers have been shot and injured in an armed incident. RNZ News believes the small township of Onepu, which is between Te Teko and Kawerau, is in lockdown. Our reporter Mihi Narangi Forbes spoke to the kaumātua of the Hahuru Marae in Onepu. Hori Rairino is inside the police cordon and is in lockdown there.
I'm looking at the police right outside my house here, and they're stopping the people coming onto our road.
What do you understand has happened?
There's a lot of cars. There's a lot of police presence just down the road. And then Karatau. Well, I was going to relate to them. I heard a shot. But yeah, I got a bit of a fright because when I went up there, they were all standing there with guns.
When did you? What time of the day did you hear a shot?
Around about 10 o'clock, I suppose, this morning.
And so you came outside of the marae, and did you see anything, or did you just hear a shot?
I just heard a shot behind me, yeah.
And you're familiar with a gun sound?
Oh, yes, oh, yes.
What do you think it was?
A high-powered rifle, I know. But the thing is, when I went to have a nosy, I get a bit of a shock with all the squad, you know, the police there, with all their guns, and then I thought, oh, well, it might have been one of them. They fired the shot, so I never said anything.
The Armed Defenders Squad.
Armed Defenders Squad, that's the one.
Hahuru Marae is at which end of One Springs Road? Onepu Springs Road?
The north end.
And so that's where the shot was fired?
Yes, yes.
And then is that the only shot you heard?
Aye. Yes.
And what happened after that? Were you able to leave the marae and go home?
Yeah, well, we didn't know what was going on. There was a plane flying around. That's the first thing I noticed when I was driving to the marae, and I saw this plane. I said, it's unusual flying around. And then when they told me that the police were shot at, and then they asked me questions, they searched my car and let me go. Because I can see from my house the marae, and I can just barely see where whatever's happened at that house, and I know all those people.
And so do you think it's happened at the marae or at a house around the marae?
No, it'll be at the house, not at the marae.
Do you know whose house it is?
Yes.
How many police officers do you think there are?
About at least 10 to a dozen.
And
different points, you know, outside my place here, one end of the road, plus the other end of the road, and where this is all happening.
Is there any helicopters in the air or anything?
Yes. There was a plane early this morning flying around, and then a helicopter came, and there's one there now. It just come over, circled around. It's gone down. It's on the road somewhere, or it's landed anyway.
And still you can't come and go from the road?
No, nothing's coming and going, no.
Hori Rairino speaking to Mihi Narangi Forbes. A second police statement has just come out. This is what the police are saying about this incident. There is currently a large police operation in the Bay of Plenty after an armed incident earlier today, and extra staff have been brought in to assist. Police can now confirm a fourth officer has been shot as a result of the events. The officer has also been transported to hospital to receive medical treatment. Members of the public are advised to avoid the area as there are a number of cordons in place. You would have heard Hori say to Mihi that the shooting that he heard took place about 10 o'clock. We've heard other reports that it was around 11 o'clock, so sometime in the late morning. So this incident is now 6 hours or so old. We'll have the police media conference. It's coming up at about 6 o'clock. We will bring that to you. The government is coming under increasing pressure to reform its more than 60-year-old adoption law, which has now been labelled discriminatory against people based on sex, marital status, disability and age. The Human Rights Review Tribunal says it breaches the Human Rights Act and the Bill of Rights Act and should be overhauled. So does the government think this is a tipping point for change? Max Toll has the story.
The tribunal's ruling adds to the chorus of voices calling for the Adoption Act to be revised. The Children's Commissioner, Family Court judges, the Law Society and UNICEF have all said the Act is out of date. The Law Commission published a report back in 2000 suggesting about 100 changes to the law, but to date, none have been implemented. Anne Else of the reform group Adoption Action, which took the case to the tribunal, says the government must act.
The problem with this decision is that it comes on the back of years of the government being told very firmly, and both Labor and national governments have been told very firmly, that the Adoption Act is extremely out of date. I mean, the United Nations has told us off first for having such an out-of-date act.
The tribunal says aspects of the Act that are discriminatory include restrictions on single men trying to adopt a female child, plus restrictions on civil union partners, same-sex de facto couples, and anyone under the age of 25 from adopting. It also prevents any adoptee under 20 obtaining a copy of their original birth certificate, and the permission of a disabled parent or guardian isn't needed for their child to be adopted. A bill sponsored by Labour's Jacinda Ardern was shot down in Parliament in 2013, and she can't explain why there's been a pushback against reform.
You can speculate, but really only the government could tell you. We've had successive ministers, though, who have acknowledged, including people like Chris Finlayson, who have acknowledged that reform is needed, but it simply just hasn't been a high priority for the government, and that was certainly the response I've received from successive ministers of justice.
Late last year, Aucklander Stuart Daly and his de facto partner won an historic court ruling, allowing them to jointly adopt children.
Our experience was when we first looked into having children, we were quickly made aware that same-sex couples at that time could not adopt at all. You know, having the Adoption Act essentially say that the welfare of children and best interests of children cannot be served by a same-sex couple is something that's upsetting.
Last year, the Justice Minister Amy Adams told RNZ News reforming adoption law wasn't on her agenda. The tribunal's decision can't force the government to change the law. We asked Amy Adams' office today if she would consider a law change, but haven't heard back yet. For Checkpoint, Max Toll.
13 and a half minutes to 6. It's Super Tuesday 2 in the US, and American presidential hopeful Donald Trump has extended his lead in the race for the Republican nomination, winning Mississippi and Michigan. The results from the Idaho vote are still trickling through, with Ted Cruz currently in the lead, while Hawaii's polls don't close until 7 o'clock New Zealand time. For the Democrats, Hillary Clinton convincingly won Mississippi, but Michigan has been hard fought, with Bernie Sanders leading as the votes are still being counted there. Our correspondent in Washington, Priscilla Huff, has been following the results and joins us now on Skype video. Hi, Priscilla. Lovely to have you with us. Clinton and Trump hoping to increase their leads today. Trump seems on the face of it to have done better than Clinton, is that right?
I would agree that Trump has done better, because just a short while ago, the folks here all declared that Bernie Sanders won Michigan. And this is a big deal, because Michigan is a large populous state. It is diverse. It's home to the American auto industry. It's got lots of universities. So this is not good news for Hillary Clinton.
And Trump won Michigan for the Republicans. So Michigan is getting out the protest vote, right?
Michigan is getting the protest vote out, but also Donald Trump is really trying to change the direction of his campaign. During his press conference, he was trying to be a bit more calm and a bit more presidential, pointing out he had this long section where he's like, I can be presidential, but sometimes when you got to win, but I can be presidential. I think he's trying to send a message both to the voters who've been turning out to him, but also to the establishment. Hey, I'm the candidate, deal with it.
Yeah, okay. Idaho. Ted Cruz still in the lead there, Priscilla. Is that the case? And is he going to get Idaho?
He might. Where it's still, the polls have only been closed there for about 30 minutes. It's also a kind of state that Ted Cruz might take, because it's a lot like Texas. It's big, it's lightly populated, and it's known for its cowboys. And Ted Cruz kind of does appeal to cowboys, but not a lot of delegates, so it may not really matter for him in the end.
He needs momentum desperately, doesn't he? Will Idaho be enough for him, or won't it matter terribly much?
Idaho will not matter enough for the big picture. What really mattered tonight was Michigan and Mississippi. And alas, as much as we all love Hawaii, Hawaii isn't really a big deal either. So I think at this point, we're really seeing a struggle for Marco Rubio is doing really badly. Ted Cruz, whatever momentum he has kind of skidded to a halt. Meanwhile, John Kasich came in a strong second in Michigan, and he's really talking about the next round of Super Tuesday, where you've got really big states, including his own Ohio, and he's hoping he's the next candidate with momentum.
Goodness gracious, is that a realistic hope, Priscilla, for him?
I don't think so, but strange things have happened. This has been a very strange race, and it's very hard to explain American politics, especially on the Republican side. But honestly, with the results in Michigan and for the Democrats, it's pretty inexplicable on both sides.
Yeah, Bernie Sanders is having his best day for a while. Is that going to make a difference for him in the long term?
It could. At the very least, it's making things extremely difficult for Hillary Clinton. Earlier, I caught a clip from David Axelrod. He was the political consultant, the architect of the Obama campaign, and he could not explain what was going on in Michigan. And if he can't explain what American voters want, Hillary Clinton's got a problem.
Priscilla Huff, thank you so much. Yes, this is the inexplicable primary season, isn't it? It's 10 minutes to 6. Concerns are growing that dairy farmers wanting to sell out of their businesses could struggle, with banks becoming nervous about lending to people in the dairy sector. So potentially lots of properties on the supply side. Real estate agents are predicting a surge of farm sales after Fonterra yesterday cut its forecast dairy payout to $3.90 per kilo of milk solids. Lots and lots of heavily leveraged farmers. What does it mean if they all start selling? Nick Butcher reports.
In Northland, there are dozens of dairy farms already on the market. The director of Bailey's Real Estate in the region, Tony Grindle, says there's been a big jump in listings in the area.
There's 70 dairy farms listed for sale in Northland on Trade Me or on the NZ Farms website. Between 67 and 72 to be accurate. Considering that the last year I think there were 16 dairy farms sold in Northland, and the year before there was 10.
And Mr Grindle says while recent farm sales in Northland have commanded strong prices, those rates will probably begin to fall. An associate professor from Massey University's School of Economics and Finance, David Tripe, says banks will be both cautious and nervous about lending large sums of money to people wanting to purchase a dairy farm.
Certainly any purchaser of a dairy farm in the current environment is going to need to have a reasonable equity cushion or reasonable support from other resources to be able to sustain a purchase. I don't think banks are going to be dead keen to do very high loan-to-value loans for the simple reason that it substantially reduces the margin of risk if things go wrong.
The Real Estate Institute's Dairy Farm Price Index for January fell 3.6% compared with the same time last year. Harcourt's Real Estate has a firm foot in the rural real estate soil, and its National Rural Manager Tom Rutherford agrees the dairy payout situation could hurt a lot of farmers.
Farmers and their advisors are running big businesses, and to have a business that's sort of running below economics and below operating costs can only go on for so long, and they've had it pretty hard now for a good 18 months, if not 2 years, and now the indication is there's a third year possibly coming along, and there's probably very few businesses that can operate like that for that period of time.
In Parliament today, the government wasn't accepting any blame for the dairy downturn. During question time, the Finance Minister Bill English faced this query from the Green Party co-leader Materia Tudeh.
Does the Minister take any responsibility for the enormous pressure dairy farming families are under, given his government has encouraged them to convert to dairy, to take on more debt, to intensify their farms, and now 5,000 families could lose their farms because of it?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, I'd be very surprised if the member spoke with any of those families that their business decisions were made by what they read from press releases from the government. These people are capable, competent people who weigh up the business risks and decide what risks they will take. Some of them might have overextended themselves, and I'd be surprised if they blamed anyone else for that.
The Real Estate Institute says it doesn't anticipate a dramatic adjustment in the price of dairy properties. For Checkpoint, Nick Butcher.
Coming up, we're going to go live to a police media stand-up at Police National Headquarters in Wellington. Deputy Commissioner Mike Clement will have the latest details on the shooting in the Bay of Plenty. 4 police officers injured. We will bring that to you. But first, fire crews in Hanmer Springs are working to extinguish the last remaining hotspots left over from that huge scrub fire and forest blaze. Firefighters spent today digging out any embers left behind by the 90-hectare fire, which started late on Monday night. The Department of Conservation says COOZE will work until dark tonight, but they're confident it will be fully out by then. Joan Vowles lives in Hamner Springs and was one of 28 people who were evacuated. She told our reporter Alex Ashton her property was one of the closest to the fire and the blaze came right up to her back fence.
The fire was sort of, 5 or 10 metres behind the house, 2 or 3 rows of trees, and then it's just all grey, it's just all burnt.
You have some water tanks out the back and they were actually, melted?
Yes, there were 3 water tanks. Yes, that's sort of 5 or 10 metres up, slightly up the hill behind the house, and yeah, they just got melted. Yes, there was another water system coming from a creek further up the hill. Well, that's just completely gone. All the pipe coming down the hill's just completely gone, in fact.
So you guys have been without water then?
Yeah, so we've got no water at the moment, but we've got there's a plumber from Culverden who's just been up and assessing it all, and yeah.
You had some dogs out the back as well in kennels.
Yes, well, when we just had to go. And I said to the fireman, "Oh, we've got 4 dogs here," and he swore, and of the local fire brigade. And anyway, we just drove up the drive, and there had been a fire, I suppose 30 years ago, right at the gateway, which they'd managed to contain, but this time it just spread. It just went so quickly. So anyway, we were down at the bridge and said to the fire brigade about the dogs, and they brought 3 of them down. They got 3 of them down fairly early on, but one dog wouldn't come out of his kennel, and he was in there, and they tried to get him out and pulled him out, and then tried to put him in the cab, and they couldn't. Just couldn't. He was just stressed out. Because I think the helicopters were going over the top then. The locals who were looking after around the house, they said, "Oh no, he's fine. They're keeping an eye on him, and they'll drag him out. If there was any danger to him." And anyway, we got him. We couldn't go up near the house till the evening. And anyway, a local farmer who'd actually had a pup from this dog, he went up and got him and brought him down. So, the dogs are fine.
That's good. But
it was a worry.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
And you must have been worried for your house as well.
Well, yes, you could just see the flames and just see them spreading. And we're just lucky that the wind was blowing up the hill.
What did you think when you came back and saw how close it had come to the house?
Well, I just think how extremely lucky we are. It's very lucky the house is here, the vegetable garden, and the garden's all fine. It's really just the water, and that's not much in the scheme of things.
That is Joan Vowles, who lives in Hamner Springs, talking to our reporter Alex Ashton. We're just coming up to the 6 o'clock news. There is a media conference about to begin in the not-too-distant future at Police National Headquarters. Quickly, before we go there, European Union leaders have welcomed a Turkish plan to help curb the massive flow of migrants into Europe. Julie Noche from Reuters with the latest.
European Union leaders welcomed Turkey's offer to take back migrants who cross into Europe from its soil in exchange for more aid during a summit in Brussels on Monday. European Council President Donald Tusk.
Firstly, I would like to announce the decision by the EU leaders to end the way-through approach, which means that the irregular flow of migrants along the Western Balkan route have now come to an end.
Turkish Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu said they would take back all migrants who enter Europe from Turkey, including Syrian refugees and those intercepted in its territorial waters. In exchange, they want more funding to help Syrian refugees stay in Turkey, faster EU membership talks, and quicker visa-free travel. German Chancellor Angela Merkel called the plan a breakthrough. Details of the plan still need to be worked out. EU leaders will meet next week for more discussions. The UN has said that the EU should not shut its doors and should be willing to take in hundreds of thousands more refugees from Turkey.
That from Julie Notcher and Reuters. We're just standing by to go to Police National Headquarters in Wellington. A media stand-up is due to begin in the next few minutes. The stand-up is at the Police National Headquarters on Molesworth Street. Deputy Commissioner Mike Clement will be talking to the media. They will be talking about a shooting in the Bay of Plenty. Police have confirmed 4 police officers have been shot. That is coming up. Kia ora everyone, you are with Checkpoint with John Campbell on RNZ National. However you are doing so, thank you for joining us. We're coming up to 6 o'clock. In the next half hour, 4 police officers have been shot in the Bay of Plenty. We will go to that media conference at Police National Headquarters. What would a proposal to broaden the GCSB's spying powers mean for New Zealanders? We'll ask the investigative journalist Nikki Hager and guilty verdicts for Russell Tully in the Ashburton work and income murder trial. But first, here is the latest RNZ News with Leilani Mamoisia.
Kia ora, good evening. A large police operation is underway after 4 police officers were shot in Bay of Plenty. 2 of the officers, both men, are in FLOCKTON Hospital and are in a stable condition. A spokesperson says a 3rd officer has been taken to Rotorua Hospital and their condition is not known. The police say a 4th officer is also receiving hospital treatment. The Armed Defenders Squad is at the scene of the shootings at a rural address near Kawero, and the police are urging people to avoid the area. The kaumātua of the Hahuru Marae in Onepu, Hori Rairino, is inside the police cordon and says he heard a bang at around 10 this morning.
I just heard a shot behind me, yeah. A high-powered rifle, I know. But the thing is, when I went to have a nosy, I get a bit of a shock with all the squad, you know, the police there, with all their guns, and I thought, oh, well, it might have been one of them that fired the shot.
Hori Rairino says police questioned him and searched his car before he was allowed to leave the marae and go home. The Police Minister, Judith Collins, has arrived at Police National Headquarters in Wellington as staff there deal with what they call a crisis situation. A witness who confronted Russell John Tully moments after he shot 2 people in the Ashburton Work and Income Office says he can now sleep, knowing Tully has been convicted of the murders. The 49-year-old was this afternoon found guilty in the High Court in Christchurch of the murders of Peggy Noble and Lee Cleveland and of attempting to murder case manager Kim Adams. David COOZE was talking to receptionist Peggy Noble when the masked gunman walked into the office in September 2014 and shot her. He confronted Tully outside the building. Mr. COOZE says he's had many sleepless nights since the shootings.
I can sleep now, yeah. It did take a while there where I was, like days would even go by where I was like, wow, you know, it felt like a week went past in a day. And yeah, every time I woke up, I was thinking of the same thing every day, night, every time I closed my eyes.
David COOZE. Tully was found not guilty of attempting to murder Lindy Curtis, who was shot in the leg in the incident. The Prime Minister says recommended changes for the GCSB would technically represent an expansion of its authority to carry out surveillance on New Zealanders. But he says it's not an extension of the intelligence agency's powers overall, as under the existing law, the SIS could still use the GCSB in certain circumstances. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell.
Under proposed new legislation, the GCSB could carry out surveillance for the purpose of protecting national security and under warrant. John Campbell says the government will now work with other political parties before starting to draft legislation. The Labour Party supports the idea of a single piece of legislation, but wants to see more detail about the GCSB potentially having more powers to spy on New Zealanders. The Green Party says it's adamantly opposed to any expansion of the government spy agency's powers. From Parliament, Chris Bramwell.
Republican frontrunner Donald Trump has rolled 2 primary wins in the big prize of Michigan and in Mississippi to expand his lead in the White House nominating race. Exit polls showed Mr. Trump had broad appeal across many demographics, winning evangelical Christians, Republicans, independents, those who wanted an outsider, and those who said they were angry about how the federal government is working. Democratic frontrunner Hillary Clinton is locked in a tight race in Michigan with rival Bernie Sanders, a US Senator from Vermont, with more than half the votes counted. The latest projections have Senator Sanders winning that race. Mrs. Clinton won in Mississippi, helped by a strong showing with African American voters, who make up more than half of the Democratic electorate. And we're going to interrupt the bulletin now to go live to a press conference about the shootings in the Bay of Plenty being held at Police National Headquarters in Wellington.
Sometimes dangerous environment. It is always distressing for us all when officers are injured while doing their duty to keep this community safe. You'll appreciate that we are still building a picture of the events around today's incident, but here is the detail that I can provide you with for the time being. At around 10:45 a.m. today, 3 shots were heard by police staff who were already in the area on a cannabis operation recovery involving the use of aircraft. At around 11:30 a.m. another shot was fired at an aircraft, and armed police staff cordoned a rural property in Ornapu Springs Road, Otakere, 70 kilometres from Rotorua and a short distance from Kawerau. AOS were then deployed from Rotorua and were in place at the address shortly after 1 p.m. this afternoon. At around 3:45 p.m. it was confirmed that 3 police officers had been shot and injured at that address. They were taken to hospital and are currently in hospitals in Whakatane and Rotorua being treated. 2 of the officers are in a stable condition, a third is in a serious but stable condition in Rotorua Hospital. A 4th officer is also being treated for a gunshot injury to their hand in a separate incident at the same scene. We are currently waiting details of his condition, but it is not believed to be serious. Police are continuing to cordon and contain the situation, and we have more specialist armed staff on their way to that address to assist staff who are already there. We are obviously providing close support to the officers who have been injured and their families, and our thoughts are with them at this time. I can assure the public that there will be a full and detailed investigation into the events of today, but for the time being our emphasis is on containing the situation which currently continues at this address and supporting the police staff who have been injured. Thank you.
Do you have any indication as to how many people are involved, the assailants?
The best information I have is that it's a sole assailant inside the address that we have cordoned.
And do you know how the 3 officers were injured, shot?
All 4 officers have been shot.
And do you know the situation to which they were?
We're building that picture as time goes on. We'll have a much more complete picture as the evening progresses, but for the time being I'm satisfied that the officers were injured in the process of apprehending the offender at the address.
Sorry, you said a plane was involved. Was the plane shot at with the officers inside?
Once again, the early indications are that a round was discharged towards the aircraft. I don't have any information to the extent that the aircraft was struck as a consequence of that.
Were any of the officers injured in the aircraft?
No officers were injured in the aircraft. All of the police staff who are members of the Armed Defenders Squad were on the ground and associated with the entry into of the address and the apprehension of the offender.
So what's the situation now? Is the offender holed up in a house or a building? Or?
So at the present time, the offender is inside the address and police staff who were present at the outset are containing that address and its environs while we bring in extra armed police staff before we do anything further.
Has he attempted to shoot at staff around the house or anything like that since then?
It's apparent that the fourth officer that I spoke of, who was shot and injured, was injured as a consequence of the ongoing activity of the offender from within the house.
Do police have any contact with the offender at the moment? Are they talking to him or what?
I'd like to better give you that detail, but I simply can't. It's an investigation that's ongoing. He might indeed be watching us on his own television, so the reality is it's probably pretty unhelpful for me from a distance to be talking to the tactical approach that the staff on the ground are taking.
Any more questions, guys?
How many officers are at the same unit?
My best information at the moment and that I can get is around 15 staff, members of the Armed Defenders Squad. But that'll be certainly something that we refine as the investigation's able to continue. As I said, our priority at the moment is making sure that we contain the activity at that address and support our staff who are in hospital.
What's the lay of the land there? Is it difficult or hilly or a situation for officers operating there?
I can't really comment. I'm not there. It's best left to those people that are on the ground, but I understand it's an environment in which police are well used to working in. I'm not hearing of any difficulty particularly associated with the ground.
Are you able to confirm whether male or female police officers?
Yes, I can confirm that all the officers are male.
And which hospitals are they in?
They're in Whakatane and Rotorua Hospital, where we have support staff with those officers and their families who we're in the process of advising.
Can you give any further details about the injuries, please?
I can't go into specifics. I'm in the process of speaking to each of the officers and the people that are supporting them at the hospitals. All gunshot injuries are obviously serious and we take them very seriously, but there is only one officer who is in a serious condition but stable, and the others' gunshot wounds are not life-threatening. So that's the best information I can provide at the moment.
Take a couple more questions, guys. Is there any more? No?
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
That was Deputy Commissioner Mike Clement. So let's clarify what Mike Clement has just said live at that media conference from Police National Headquarters on Molesworth Street in Wellington. There appears, as far as the police are aware, to be one offender. They think it's a he, is cordoned off inside a house. That house is surrounded. 4 officers have been shot, 3 of them earlier in the day and a 4th more recently by the offender from inside the house. The offence is located in a very small little township between Whakatane and Rotorua. 3 of the officers have relatively minor injuries. A 4th officer has a serious injury but is in a stable condition. Those details from Deputy Commissioner Mike Clement, speaking live at Police National Headquarters. As you heard, it's 12 minutes past 6. Spying is in the spotlight after spy agencies' review has found the SIS and the GCSB should operate under one law, and that under particular circumstances both should be able to carry out surveillance on New Zealanders. Some parts of the current law have been described as a double-humped ass by one of the reviewers, the former Labour Deputy Prime Minister Michael Cullen. He says the law is so disjointed and inconsistent it could compromise the safety and security of New Zealanders. The Prime Minister, John Campbell, has asked whether the proposed changes would result in an expansion of the powers of the GCSB. He was asked this, particularly when it comes to spying on New Zealanders.
Because the report recommends that under very narrow set of circumstances for national security, what they call a Tier 1 warrant could be raised by GCSB that would allow them to, in their own right, undertake some surveillance against New Zealanders. Technically, yes, it's an extension of their current authority. I don't think it's an extension of powers of the agencies overall, because under the existing law and under the right set of circumstances, SIS could generate a warrant for which it could then use GCSB as an agent of them to do the same thing. So the reason, of course, why the reviewers are recommending this is that while it would be possible for SIS to do this in their own name, they'd have to develop a lot more capability, or to use GCSB is more challenging. So they're simply saying for better national security they see it, but it's in a very narrow set of circumstances with a very increased level of oversight, because you'd need a judicial commissioner to sign the warrant as well.
Haven't you defended in the past, or haven't you wanted in the past the separation between the external and the domestic agencies to be maintained?
I think as a general perspective, that's really been our driving motivation of keeping them separate as agents, and in principle that's what we want to maintain. I think what they're really simply pointing out here is there are some very, very unique circumstances in relation to national security where they might gather some information incidentally that could lead them to potentially undertaking some activity, but it would have to be under these very defined circumstances. So it's a tiny subset of what they'd be doing. It is a change, but change that comes with much bigger oversight if you would adopt it.
So that's the Prime Minister speaking in Parliament this afternoon, as you could hear from the bells. The Green Party co-leader Materia Ture says the report's recommendations, if adopted, would represent one of the most significant erosions of New Zealanders' privacy seen in modern times.
The recommendation to combine the agencies to allow the GCSB to spy on New Zealanders is unacceptable.
Well, they don't recommend a merger of the agencies, they recommend a
merger of the legislation, a single act that would effectively result in the merger of these agencies in some form, and they admit that is the likely outcome. And so what we need to see is a bright line between the powers of the GCSB, which is to collect a wide range of information and share it with the US, Canada, Australia and the UK, and a very bright line test between that and the SIS.
That was Materia Ture, Green Party co-leader. Investigative journalist Nicky Hager has written extensively on this subject. Of course, he's also collaborated with various media to publish stories based on files taken by US whistleblower Edward Snowden from the US National Security Agency. He has analysed what the Waihopai spy base is up to as part of the GCSB, and he joins us on the line from Wellington now. Nicky, welcome to the program. Was this kind of inevitable after the GCSB Amendment Bill in 2013?
No, and when we had the bill in 2013, it was like we were told that was the bill that was cleaning everything up, and that the GCSB would be given some extra powers to tidy things up because there'd been a misunderstanding, and that was the end of it. And I slightly believed them, but there was one issue that was still hanging in the air, which was uncomfortable for the GCSB, which was that they were still illegally collecting New Zealanders' metadata overseas. And I thought that they would possibly try to clean it up. In fact, this latest review goes much further than that, and it's just chucking away any restraints on, well, not that they're stopping the pre-existing restraint on spying on New Zealanders. So this
can you clarify what you think this means? What powers does this give to the GCSB, or would this give to the GCSB, sorry, that it doesn't already have?
Through most of its life, and including when Michael Cullen was in government, the idea was that the GCSB has these massive national security kind of powers for wars and spies and troubles in the world that won't get used on New Zealanders at all. So there was no New Zealanders at all. And then in the GCSB bill, the act that went through in 2013, they'd found they were doing it. So they tried to legalise the bit, but now they're just taking the prohibition away at all. And what that means is, what I think that means, although of course we haven't seen the wording of it, is that activities like routine collection of New Zealanders' metadata and their overseas communications, that will all be legal now. In other words, it's going to allow a lot more spying on New Zealanders routinely in an ongoing way than has been possible under law up till now.
The GCSB Amendment Bill in 2013 was portrayed by critics at the time as the thin edge of the wedge. In other words, have we been heading incrementally towards this point? And Dame Patsy Reddy and Sir Michael Cullen simply a kind of public face of a direction the government had always intended to go in, or is that simply too cynical?
No, I think that's completely right, because the trouble with something called an independent review is it's all about who chooses the reviewers. And particularly in the case of Michael Cullen, he was a well-known friend of the intelligence agencies. He will have been paid very well to deliver a result which is exactly what they wanted. Maybe, he adds his own pomposity and things to the report, but it's basically exactly what the agencies would want. It has some minor tweakings of oversight, but really this is 95-5 in favour of the intelligence agencies. So this wasn't an independent review. This was a cooked-up process which got them the things that they wanted.
Nicky Hager, investigative journalist, joining us live from Wellington. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Coming up to 19 minutes past 6. After a 2-week trial and 7 hours of jury deliberations, Russell John Tully has been found guilty of the murders of Ashburton work and income workers Peggy Noble and Lee Cleveland. Tully, who faced 7 charges in relation to the fatal shootings in 2014, was also found guilty of the attempted murder of Kim Adams. Minutes after the verdicts, the Ministry of Social Development's Chief Executive Brendan Boyle spoke to media outside the High Court in Christchurch, where the trial had been taking place. He says the result is a relief for everyone involved, but the trial has brought back painful memories.
My main thought at the moment is for Peg Noble and Lee Cleveland and their families, and acknowledging the pain and the suffering that they've gone through. It's a relief to get to this point, to get the verdict, but I'll always be thinking about what happened on that day, on the 1st of September, the awful events in the office, and what transpired there, and the pain and suffering of the families of all the victims, not just those who lost their lives, those who were there on the day, and their families.
Brendan Boyle also spoke about how difficult it was for staff to give evidence at the trial.
You saw the emotion. It's a very difficult thing to relive. For each of them, they saw that CCTV footage for the first time when they were on the stand. So that was a very difficult thing for them to go through, but I also saw an incredible amount of bravery and courage, and they stood up there. They were anxious to make sure that that story was told and that that evidence was given, and I think they did a tremendous job. So I'm incredibly proud of them.
The Ministry of Social Development Chief Executive says the verdicts will bring some closure. Last year, WorkSafe laid one charge against the Ministry of Social Development over the shootings, alleging that it had failed to take all practical steps to ensure the safety of its employees. Mr Boyle was today asked whether the Ministry could have done more to protect its staff.
Well, that's an issue that WorkSafe are asking, and we have gone through that really diligently. Just after the event, we had an independent review completed by ex-Police Commissioner Rob Robinson, and they concluded that we did take all reasonable and practicable steps. So I'm confident that we had done what we needed to do. As you have seen through this case, the events that transpired there that day were extreme. They were a very well-motivated individual who was armed with a very dangerous weapon.
Brendan Boyle speaking outside the High Court in Christchurch after those guilty verdicts this afternoon, 21 minutes past 6 on Checkpoint. David COOZE had suffered a shoulder injury and was visiting his caseworker, Peggy Noble, at the Ashburton Winds office when he saw Russell Tully walking into the office wearing a balaclava.
He just basically walked right around the counter and shot Peggy, the lady she was interviewing me at the time. And, yeah, it wasn't a good sight at all.
No, a terrible sight, which I suspect you simply can't get out of your mind.
No, I never will. It'll never ever leave me. It'll never, it's just one of those things that I wish I could delete, but I can't.
No, I can well imagine that. You were there as a client, of course, right?
Yeah, that's right. I played a minute or two while I was in there. Yeah, this gunman came in and, pulled up a gun and just used it straight away. Not even say one word or nothing.
What happened after that first exchange, after that first shot? What happened then?
I spun around and I just seen people that were there, and I knew we can't do anything at all, and I was too far away from him to get a hold of the guy. But so I just turned around and pushed this lady in the back there to say to her, we're out of here, and she knew. And then at the same time, she was away out the door. At the same time, I looked at the guard, and he was standing there, and I just grabbed his arm and just told him, no, you'll be next, mate. So I grabbed his arm, and I noticed that there was no children there, so I was so happy that there was no children there. So grabbed the guard and walked out the door. By the time I walked out the second door, I had the second shot go off. I was thinking, oh my God, there's another person gone. And I just across the road, and let the people know across there, they tell them to ring the police. And I spun around and seen this guy coming out.
And this is what makes your story even more extraordinary is that rather than running, you decided to confront him at that time. What made you do that?
I think I was a bit angry too, you know. At the same time, I wanted to delay him or even give his ass a bit of a smack, you know, or kick in the ass or something, you know. But what made me do it? I think I was more angry than anything that made me just took over me, and before you know it, just as I was going for this guy, I was just thinking, he shoots me, but I was just thinking of my daughter at the time then too. I was thinking if I get shot, I think my daughter will understand.
David COOZE, who was in the Winds office and then followed Russell Tully after the shooting, shouting at him and actually causing Russell Tully to drop his helmet, which was produced in evidence against him in court. The time on Checkpoint is coming up to 6:25. Coming up on World Watch at 6:30 with Elizabeth Brown. World health authorities issue more warnings over the Zika virus, and another door closes along the migrant trail. Another one. Goodness. It's been a heavy old checkpoint tonight with one thing or another, so let's discuss sport with Matt Chatterton as a form of escape. Matt, welcome. The Blues and Hurricanes both names their sides for a crucial early season match at Eden Park Friday night. The Hurricanes none from 2, the Blues 1 from 2. They both have to win, don't they?
They sure do. Blues coach Tana Umanga has made quite a few changes to his lineup for the Hurricanes match. He's gone and made 9 all up. Shows how much he wanted to get away from that game against the Crusaders. The likes of Patrick Tuipulotu has been pushed to the bench. He's the lock for the Blues. Tana said Patrick will be the first to admit that he didn't play a very good game in Christchurch, and so unfortunately he's been moved to the bench. And Stephen Luatua, who's normally in the loose forwards, he's going to be moving up into lock. We've also got Ihia West and Bryn Hall. They're back playing in halfback and first 5 position. Akira Ioane, the up-and-comer, is playing at number 8, so he'll be good. Looking at the Hurricanes, there's still a little bit of doubt around whether Corey Jane, Nehemiah Scudder and Dane Coles will be available.
Wow,
so
that's a terrible trio to not have in your team.
It really is. They've got a captain's run tomorrow, and there's going to be confirmation after that whether or not they will be playing. But those 3 names in particular would be a big loss to...
Especially Coles in the leadership role, in my opinion.
Exactly.
Okay, let's talk about Maria Sharapova.
Well, yes. Well, what more is there to tell, I suppose? There's a story that's come out over in Australia that said she got told no more than 5 times before the Australian Open that this drug, meladonium, I think it's pronounced, is going to be on the ban list in WADA. And
what the story saying that she was told?
Well, that the players were told at least 5 times in the lead up. Sorry, I'm not saying yes. Make sure we get that clear. So that's come out this afternoon. A number of her sponsors have also dropped her as again today, following Nike's decision yesterday. And there's no word yet on how long her ban is going to be, but it starts on Saturday, and it could be up to 4 years.
Matt, you've got 40 seconds. You've got to be finished by 28 minutes past. Okay, there's your clock. Black Caps have settled in Mumbai, ready for the start of the T20 World Cup.
Yes, well, that's a good question to ask me because I actually know not that much about it. So, yeah, they are there. Kane Williamson's given a quick statement to the media via video. By the sounds of it, they're getting relaxed. They're in Mumbai. They look as though they're having a good time. That's about all I can say on that, unfortunately.
Yeah, eating delicious food. That was good. 15 seconds to spare. Are we going to win it? Can we win the T20 match?
I hope so.
That's a lovely answer. Matt Chatterton. Blues Hurricanes on Friday night. That'll be a cracker of a game at Eden Park, won't it, Matt? Fans of Harry Potter, we're going to end tonight with real escapers, and fans of Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling getting a treat this week as her digital publisher website, Pottermore, is releasing a series of 4 pieces of writing about wizardry entitled History of Magic in North America. The writings, which are posted at 1400 GMP each day from Tuesday to Friday, are meant to set the scene for the highly anticipated Harry Potter spin-off movie called Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Saskia O'Donoghue from Reuters reports.
JK's done it again. The Harry Potter author is releasing even more wizardry wonder. Fans can read 4 new instalments about the history of magic in America on her website Pottermore. Starting from Tuesday, 1 a day will appear there, as if, of course, by magic. JK launched the site in 2011, at the time saying she was thrilled with the new platform.
Of course, it's been an amazing experience for me to be able to be creative in this medium that didn't exist back in 1990 when I first had the idea for the books.
The new writing is actually a teaser for this, her next movie, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Set in the secret community of witches and wizards, we follow the adventures of writer Newt Scamander, played by none other than Oscar winner Eddie Redmayne. While promoting his film The Danish Girl, Redmayne said he was delighted to work with JK.
Like J.K. Rowling, who's written this, has created such extraordinary characters, and I love the world that she creates, and I love her imagination, and so going to be a part of it is kind of wonderful.
While many thought the Harry Potter world came to an end after the last film was released in 2011, it seems as though J.K. Rowling still has many more tricks up her sleeve to come.
And that brings Checkpoint to an end this evening. On a day 4 police officers were shot and injured in the Bay of Plenty. The alleged offender still cordoned off inside a house there. Details in the news at 7. That's Checkpoint for tonight.
RNZ News headlines now at 6:30. And as you've just heard, of course, 4 police have been shot in a standoff with a man outside a house near Kawerau in Bay of Plenty. 3 police are stable and 1 seriously injured. Russell John Tully has been found guilty of 2 murders at the Ashburton Work and Income Office. The Prime Minister says recommended changes for the GCSB represent an expansion of its authority to carry out surveillance on New Zealanders. And the head of the FBI has been in New Zealand this week to meet with 2 government ministers and the police commissioner. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Welcome to World Watch PM. I'm Elizabeth Brown. Tonight, stepped up warnings over the Zika virus, another door closes along the migrant trail, and have we reached peak car? Those stories and more in World Watch.